in my career as a legal academic, I've never been more concerned than I am about this law that's being proposed by the Albanese government, which ostensibly is about keeping Australians safe. That's what they've said. And what they're going to do is counter so-called misinformation and disinformation on the internet. And the way they're going to do this is they're going to get a bunch of government bureaucrats who are going to work out what their version of the truth is. And if they see that the social media companies aren't censoring people who don't comply with the government's version of the truth, then those social media companies can have huge fines imposed on them. So this is really concerning stuff because it's essentially a law that will introduce censorship in Australia. George Orwell wrote his book 1984 about this kind of dystopian world where censorship is the norm, or in which the Ministry of Truth is the determinant of what is true. And in his dystopian novel, we see again how the Ministry of Truth alters the fact, it rewrites history, and the main aim is to create an obedient, compliant society. And the Ministry of Truth has these slogans. It says freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, war is peace. And so it's essentially trying to recreate the truth with no reference to objective truth, but essentially rewriting the facts. And George Orwell really paints a picture of what this looks like, what sort of world this then becomes. And yet I can't believe we are here in 2023 and the Albanese government is planning to introduce an Orwellian-style Ministry of Truth in Australia. And it's a massive red flag that the tech companies are actually willing to sign up to this law, that they're supporting it, because we already know that the tech companies, Meta, which runs Facebook, they already do a huge amount of censorship. They already remove and delete posts that don't comply with their dominant ideology, and they want to sign up to this law. And I think what that really exposes is that this is an unholy alliance between the government, between the tech companies, who want to determine what the truth is, and they will remove the voices of Australians who disagree with them and don't comply with that dominant ideology. This is really scary. I mean, I went out on social media last July. I've been a professor of law, an academic researching on justice for migrant people my entire career. But I decided to speak out on the issue of abortion because I could see that the mainstream media and the government had a dominant ideology that abortion is healthcare and that it advantages women. And I could see from my own data, research, looking into this, that this just wasn't the truth. And I wanted to get those facts and those information out there, and that there was no way through the mainstream media. They just don't let alternative voices through. And so I started my own Instagram account, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and the main goal was to spark a national conversation on the issue of abortion. But if this law by the Albanese government passes, I will no longer be able to have that conversation with you. I will no longer be able to distribute facts and data on the issue of abortion because the government will shut down my voice because I don't comply with their dominant ideology. I will be labelled disinformation. And you may not care about abortion, you may not agree with me that it's ethically wrong and that it harms women. And that's fine because we can agree to disagree. I mean, that's what democracy is, that's what robust debate is. But no doubt you have issues that you care about. And I think the problem with this law is that it gives the government the right to define what the truth is on any issue, on any area that you care about, whether that's the environment or climate change, whether it's workers' rights, whether it's vaccines and the pandemic. Take your pick. Whatever issue you care about, the government through this law will now be able to determine what the truth is. And if you don't comply with them, you'll be labelled as disinformation and then you will be silenced and removed. Just this week, a US judge in the District Court of Louisiana, he handed down a decision, and it's an interesting decision because it's looking at the fact that during the pandemic, posts that gave information or presented alternative viewpoints on issues such as the efficacy of vaccines or wearing masks or the effects of lockdown, those posts were censored, heavily censored by tech companies in cahoots with the government. So this is essentially what Albanese is trying to propose here. But it happened during the pandemic in the US, and the White House, the FBI, the health department, they were all in league with the tech companies removing these posts. And this judge has just handed down a decision saying that this is abhorrent in a democracy, that freedom of speech is essential, that it's through the free contest of ideas, the marketplace of ideas, the places where we debate and discuss, that's how we work out the truth, that it's not up to the government to determine what the truth is and then to force everybody to comply. So this decision actually says that the government cannot censor information. But what I'm concerned about is here we are in Australia, and the Australian government is actually planning to introduce laws that legalise censorship. The bill allows mainstream media, the government and tech companies to weaponise the label of disinformation against people who dare question or disagree with the dominant ideology by the establishment. And Chris Mitchell, who's a journalist at The Australian, criticising this Albanese bill, he writes this week, "For some journalists, labelling a story disinformation is a tactic to delegitimise reporting they believe politically unpalatable." Now, Mitchell uses other examples in his article to show how journalists have labelled people they don't agree with disinformation in order to discredit them. But I want to use an example from the abortion space. So just last week, news.com.au had this article up. And if we look at the headline of this article, it says, "Disinformation, Australia reaches critical reproductive rights tipping point." And in the article itself, the author writes, "Anti-choice picketers will still rally against us. Anti-choice rallies in Australia will continue to spout disinformation and fuel fake news." Now, the thing about this article, it's literally written by an abortion provider. It's written by Booney Coben, who is the Director of Research for Marie Stopes International. That's Australia's version of Planned Parenthood, which is a $2 billion company. And MSI in Australia is the leading abortion provider. They literally have a vested interest in more abortion. And news.com.au, in publishing this so-called news article by a person that's an insider who complies with the dominant ideology, they titled it disinformation. Never mind the fact that in the article, if you read it, there's not a single example of the so-called disinformation that's been produced by these anti-choice, pro-life, against abortion people like myself. There's not a single example given, but the use of the label disinformation by news.com.au, who's given a voice to Booney Coben, who works for MSI and has a vested interest in more abortion, the purpose of that label is to discredit people that are against abortion, and that's effectively what this article is about. The problem with the Albanese government law is that not only will we have news organisations publishing articles with the title disinformation, but that label of disinformation will then be weaponised against people like me who speak out against abortion on social media. In fact, I won't even be able to do a video like this calling out Booney Coben and news.com.au because I'll just be silenced. I'll be cancelled because I'll be censored and removed because I'm apparently disinformation for criticising them. I think this is really concerning that we already have this kind of censorship in the media and this kind of discrediting of people that we don't agree with. And yet this law by the Albanese government will allow this to be enshrined, and there'll be an obligation on tech companies to remove people like me who don't comply with the dominant narrative. The second point I want to make is that this bill by the Albanese government will allow the tech companies and the government to determine what the facts are and to be the arbiter of what is true. And this is dangerous because if you don't agree with their version of truth, you'll be cancelled. Take this example by Tori Shepherd, who's written an article for Crikey. It's about this bill that George Christensen introduced to give mandatory legal rights to babies who are born alive after a failed abortion. Now, some background. Tori Shepherd is aggressively pro-abortion. She's been a journalist for a long time. She writes many, many pieces about why abortion is a good thing. She's entitled to that view. I don't agree with it, but Tori is totally entitled to that view in a democracy, and she's entitled to write articles to that effect. But let's look at this article that she wrote for Crikey about George Christensen's bill. This is the headline. He's tabling a bill about a myth, calling bullshit on George Christensen's abortion move. Now, Tori's allowed to call BS on George Christensen's bill. Again, it's a democracy. She's entitled to her free speech. I'm entitled to mine. So is George Christensen. So are you. That's how democracy works. But the thing is, in this article, what she essentially says is that it's a complete myth that babies are born alive and left to die after a failed abortion. She says it doesn't happen, it's nonsensical, it's a bill about a non-issue. In fact, there's not a single article written in the mainstream press, and there's many articles that have been written in the Australian recently about this issue, and not one of them actually exposes that this is a situation that babies are born alive and left to die in Australia. Not one of them exposes that. And at the start of June, I presented damning evidence at a Senate inquiry in Canberra. I talked about a baby at Westmead Hospital being zipped into a medical bag while still breathing. I talked about Jessica Jane, a little baby in the NT who was left for 80 minutes on a metal plate in an empty room. And then I did a press conference after in Parliament House, and ABC News and SBS were there. But they did not report on any of this because it didn't comply with their dominant narrative that abortion is healthcare, and anyone that criticises abortion gets silenced, by the mainstream media. And yet it's through social media that I've been able to draw attention to Australians of the facts. So I had a reel go to 115,000 Australians of the press conference. So even though ABC and SBS didn't cover it, I filmed it on my dodgy iPhone and put it on Instagram, and it went to 115,000 Australians. And I managed to get out the facts that in Queensland and Victoria between 2010 and 2020, 724 babies have been born alive after a failed abortion and then left to die with no legal rights. And then on Facebook, I put up a video with footage of a baby being born alive and left to die in the 1960s in Britain because they were disabled. And it's really distressing footage. And I make the point in that video that this still happens in Australia today. And that video went to over 2 million Australians. So, you can see here the power of social media. It allows us to talk. It allows us to share data and facts that the mainstream media doesn't let us get out. Yeah, ABC, SBS, The Australian, Crikey, The Guardian, they all censor what we want to talk about. They all censor the release of information. I'm a professor of law. I'm not just some person on the street talking about the issues. So when I held a press conference and released data, I think they should have reported it. It's a huge issue in our country that we don't have birth equality, and yet the mainstream media won't touch this, except if, to have an article like Tory Shepherd's to say this is a bill about a myth, it's a non-issue, it's nonsensical. This is why social media is important, because the mainstream media already censors us, and social media is our public square, and it's how we get the facts out. Another example, this year the government conducted an inquiry into reproductive health care, and thousands of Australians wrote submissions. And yet when the government handed down its report, the Senate inquiry, and it was led by the Greens and Labor, they didn't publish the submissions. There was 1,620 Australians that were pro-life, against abortion, who wrote submissions, and they were just erased from the record. They weren't published. And in fact, in the report, the Senate inquiry report says there were 352 submissions that were given, and they were published on the website. But yet anybody that dared disagree with the dominant narrative that abortion is healthcare, they were removed from the inquiry process. And the inquiry held 4 days of oral hearings. They went around Australia talking to people about reproductive healthcare. They didn't speak to a single individual or organisation who was against abortion. So this leaves me gravely concerned that this new law by the Albanese government, not only will we be seeing censorship that already goes on through Senate inquiries and through the mainstream media, they don't let the data and facts out, but this new law will allow tech companies to define the truth in accordance with this dominant ideology that's being pursued by the government. And there's nothing we can do about it. In fact, we will be completely constrained. I will no longer be able to exist, and many other people who speak truth to power will no longer be able to exist on social media. So the third problem with the bill is that it will allow the government to shut down anyone that they see as causing harm. And that's really concerning, because they're the ones that are going to be the arbiter of whether you're causing harm. So under their definition, because I don't agree that abortion is healthcare, I'm out there on social media talking about the data and the effects of abortion on women. I'm also talking about the need for socioeconomic support for women in order to enable them to carry their babies. I'm also talking about the need to end disability discrimination in utero, to stop the feticide of girl babies. I'm talking about all of these things, and they will say that I'm causing harm to women who want to have abortions, and they will shut me down. And we already have government websites that are essentially propaganda vehicles for the abortion industry. Look at this website by SA Health. So I live in South Australia. This is the health department website for women who have an unplanned pregnancy. It has a list of helpful resources for women considering abortion or who have an unplanned pregnancy. And then they have a series of resources linked to, and look at the title. Look at what it says. Pro-choice websites that may assist, pro-choice post-abortion support sites. And they're not even being shy about the fact that they are pro-choice, that that this is their ideological position. It's not like later down in the website they have pro-life websites that may assist. They've taken a deliberate position, which is that they are pro-choice. And again, the government of the day is entitled to do this. This is a democracy. But what I'm concerned about is if the Albanese government law passes, then a government health website that has pro-choice resources and is explicitly, aggressively pro-choice. If you're not pro-choice, if you're against abortion like I am, if you think it causes grave harm to women and it kills a human being in utero, then you're disinformation, because you're not complying with their version of the truth. And their version of the truth is really shonky in my view. Like if you scroll down on this SA Health website, they've got 37 links, and the majority of the links are to pro-abortion websites. So they've got this random pro-abortion academic, Leslie Cannold. They've even got a link to Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice and Catholics for Choice. I mean, these are niche groups that aren't even existing in Australia. The links take you to a foreign website. And then they've even got this link to a play that was produced and filmed at the Fringe Festival about a woman who aborted her 19-week-old baby because the baby had Down syndrome and was disabled. And, you know, like, I'm just sort of like, how is this helpful to women who have an unplanned pregnancy? There's not a single link to an actual material resource, a pregnancy help centre or a pregnancy counselling service. There's no link to actual services that could help women, and that's because the ideological position of SA Health is pro-choice. Now, you know, that's okay, but the Albanese government, if this law passes, then essentially if you don't comply with the pro-choice position of SA Health, then you are disinformation, you know. And I look at their website and I think it's just full of disinformation, but I'm entitled to say that. They're entitled to their view. This is the free contest of ideas. This is the marketplace of ideas. This is how we determine truth. It's not through the Albanese government being big brother with their Ministry of Truth in cahoots with the tech companies silencing people like me. I got into this issue of abortion originally in Oxford when I was a Rhodes Scholar studying my PhD in law, and I wasn't a member of the Pro-Life Society. In fact, I'd just very recently converted from being pro-choice to pro-life because a friend had challenged me on the issue. I looked into it and I decided I had to be against abortion because it kills a human being and it's just not justifiable. So I'd come to that view, and a friend had told me that the Pro-Life Society in Oxford had been banned from the O Week, from Orientation Week, and they weren't allowed to have a stall because they had pictures of a fetus in their stall. Now, the pictures of the fetus weren't dismembered, they weren't bloodied, they weren't post-abortive, you know, it wasn't body parts. It was literally a scientifically accurate picture of a fetus like you would see in any biology textbook. And they had been banned because they wanted to show these images that were scientifically accurate. And so I was actually pretty outraged by this because I just thought, well, if you can't have free speech at a university, then where can you have it? And universities are where we can test ideas. So I wrote an article for the UK Times called The Fetus and Free Speech, calling this out. And that was one of the things that really sort of was a wake-up call for me in terms of how there's a dominant ideology and a dominant narrative on the issue of abortion. And if you don't comply, then you get silenced. So I had my own experience of being labelled disinformation by the ABC in 2019. A colleague and I had been researching conscientious objection in the law, and we'd been looking at this in the context of referral for abortion because there were laws at the time that said that doctors have to refer for abortion even if they have a conscientious objection to abortion. And so we were looking at those laws and we were looking in the context of military conscription, and we published our article overseas in the Cambridge Law Journal. And in 2019, the New South Wales Parliament was debating abortion up to birth, and one of the things that we observed is that if this law passed, it would force doctors to refer for abortion, and there would be more abortions because it was allowing abortion up to birth. We wrote a piece for the Sydney Morning Herald, and in it we used a statistic, and we said that late-term abortions had increased by 39% since Victoria had legalised abortion to birth in 2008. Now, this opinion piece got a lot of attention. It was quoted in the Parliament. We were interviewed on radio. It was a pretty big deal. It was making waves. And so I guess then, you know, the people that are in charge of the dominant ideology on abortion, the ABC and the university, so RMIT, they did this so-called fact check. And it was weaponized against myself and this colleague. And the ABC released this fact check, this so-called fact check, and they could have given any number of verdicts to the statistic. They could have said, you know, it was slightly wrong, it was not quite true, but instead they labelled it as completely wrong, even though the statistic was actually technically correct. And they actually admit that in the article. The verdict that we were objectively wrong was clearly an overreach by the ABC. And, you know, there wasn't really much we could do because they refused to publish our response, and the Sydney Morning Herald refused to publish our response. And so we had to publish our response on a website that really very few people read. But it really spoke to me at the time about the fact that the ABC and the mainstream media, they have a dominant narrative, and you can be labelled disinformation just for disagreeing with them, even if the statistic you're using is accurate. They'll just find a bunch of statisticians that agree with them who then say, well, the statistic might technically be accurate, but it was used in the wrong way, which is essentially what they did in this opinion piece to try and discredit us. And, you know, it's so telling because they didn't fact check other claims that were in the media at the time. You know, there was this article, there was a pro-abortion article in the Sydney Morning Herald which said this: late-term abortions only occur because the fetus has a lethal congenital abnormality. Now, this is untrue. 44% of late-term abortions in Victoria are on physically healthy babies with physically healthy mums. There's literally nothing wrong with them. Yet the ABC chose not to fact check that. And in their fact check, in which we were labelled as disinformation, at the end of that fact check, they literally quoted a pro-abortion academic study which interviews abortion providers. So this is no joke. At the end of the so-called fact check, which was being weaponized against us, they literally quoted abortion providers who then waxed on about how access to abortion is so difficult in Australia and how abortion providers need more resources and more support to be able to give women more abortions. So this was a politically motivated, ideologically driven fact check aimed to discredit me and my colleague because we dared to speak out against the dominant narrative. When we wanted to respond, they didn't let us have a voice. They didn't let us be heard. And, you know, the thing is, if the Albanese bill passes, not only will ideological organisations like the ABC be able to weaponise fact checks against us, it will mean that we will no longer be allowed a voice on social media and on the internet because we will be removed because we are so-called disinformation. But remember, they are determining the facts. They are deciding what's true here. You know, and in the abortion space, what we've seen since Roe v. Wade is horrible disinformation from news outlets and from pro-abortion politicians and government figures. You know, we've seen Stacey Abrams from the Democrats say that a baby's heart doesn't start beating at 3.5 weeks, which is what the scientific consensus has always been. In fact, she says, you know, that's a manufactured sound. And Planned Parenthood, the biggest abortion provider in the world, changed its website after Abrams made this statement to reflect this lie that Abrams was perpetuating. So that now becomes the so-called truth. And if you say that a baby's heart beats at 3.5 weeks, then you're harmful disinformation. And if the Albanese government passes its law, no doubt your posts will be removed from the social media and from the internet. You know, and then we have The Guardian that produced these pictures of what a pregnancy apparently looks like up to 10 weeks. And, you know, they literally removed the fetus from these pictures. At 9 weeks, a fetus is 2.2 centimetres long. They would be clearly visible in a petri dish of this size. And yet The Guardian removed the fetus. And then they said, this is what a pregnancy looks like. But again, if the Albanese government bill passes, then the Ministry of Truth will say that, yes, this is what a pregnancy looks like. And we'll literally be living in a dystopian world where people like me can't speak freely on social media. Social media is our public square. It's the place where we have freedom of speech, where we can talk about the issues that matter to us. We can share posts, we can discuss data, we can talk about research, we can contest ideas. But now that is all under threat by this government. And as I've said a few times in this video, you may disagree with me on the issue of abortion, but surely we can agree that free speech and protecting it is fundamentally important. I agree that, you know, when people lie and deceive about the facts and the data, that is problematic. I agree that that's a challenge, but I don't think creating an Australian government Ministry of Truth is the way to resolve that challenge. I believe that the truth eventually prevails as we contest ideas, as we discuss and we debate. So there's 5 action items I have for you. The first is please go to my website and sign this petition to kill the bill. The only way we will kill this bill is through people power, to show the Albanese government that if they pass this, we will be outraged, we will rise up, and we are against it. Politicians ultimately are animals of survival. They want to survive the election cycle, they want to get voted in again. So, you know, if we can rise up against this bill in massive numbers, then we can kill it. So go to my website and sign the petition. The second thing is submissions are open on this bill until August 6th. So look at the link in the description below and please put in a submission. It only takes a few minutes. Just write a few sentences about why you think this bill is really damaging to our democracy and why it enshrines censorship and it harms free speech. So put in that submission. The third and fourth things I want you to do is to write an email to the Prime Minister and to write an email to Michelle Rowland, who's the Minister for Communications in charge of this bill. So those 2 action items, I've got the email addresses in the description. Please do write a quick email to the PM and to Michelle Rowland to tell them that you do not want this bill to pass. And then the 5th thing I'm going to ask you is to share this video with friends, have a watch party, you know, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Instagram, TikTok and Facebook, because ultimately we need to create a community of people that are passionate about free speech because it is under threat. So thank you very much for your time, and, you know, please do in the comments below tell me what you think.